I'm Jumana Karachi in Istanbul, and this is CNN.
It is the top of the hour. It is 8 o'clock in London, and a very good evening to you. So the votes have been cast. The secret ballot is closed. And in the next hour, the fate of the British Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, will be revealed. Only moments ago, MPs, Tory MPs, his party MPs, finished voting in the ballot of no confidence. The goal of the ballot, of course, is whether to unseat the British Prime Minister. Nerve-wracking as the votes are cast for Boris Johnson. He will find out at the end of it all, of course, whether he still has the job, the backing, after this bruising confidence vote. Sir Graham Brady is the chair of the 1922 Backbench Committee. Don't worry why it's called that. We'll explain that at some point this evening. Anyway, he'll announce the outcome at 9 p.m. That's in an hour from now. So who's been doing the voting? They are Conservative lawmakers, his own MPs. They will be gathering the result in about 40 minutes from now. It was their discontent, his own backbenchers, his own party members, if you will, about the Partygate scandal and the cost of living crisis that sparked this evening's dramatic rebellion. And it did happen very quickly. So, how did we actually get here? It's worth looking at it and the confidence motion that's been passed, or at least that's been put before them tonight. The vote was triggered because at least 54 Conservative MPs, that's about 15% of his MPs, said they could no longer support him. It was announced by this 1922 committee chairman, which represents them, the backbenchers, if you will, not the cabinet ministers, not government ministers, not those on the payroll. If a majority fail to back him, he'll be forced out of Downing Street. He won't also be allowed to run and to find in the race for the replacement. And more than that, even if he wins by a small margin, it'll be touch and go. Issa's with me, Issa Suarez. Well, it happened so quickly.
It happened so quickly, and what that graph does not show you, Richard, is that even if he does, of course, if he does win by a significant margin or whatever, it doesn't mean necessarily that he will be able to hold on to his position in the long term. So the number has to be significant. Look at Theresa May. Look at Margaret Thatcher. Theresa May had 2/3, correct? Am I correct?
Yes. But here we haven't had a deluge of letters. The way it works is you have to send a letter to the chairman of this committee, and when it reaches the 15% limit, their level, then you have this election. Now they've dribbled in these letters over many months.
That's the threshold. We do not know how many. Right?
Yes.
That's the threshold. So they wouldn't, the 1922 committee would not say how many letters they actually have. So there's no way of knowing. But the threshold has been met. Right. Hence why the vote has taken place.
But the rules are very quick, aren't they? The vote has to be held very quickly. And if he wins tonight, he's quasi safe.
Yeah, and I think the fact that it's happening quickly, I think plays to his advantage, because there is no time to plot.
Yes.
Right? There's no time to plot against him, which Jacob Rees-Mogg, a Conservative MP, has been saying today that what this is, in fact, is a plan, a well-organised plan by those Remainers, the begrudged Remainers who want him unseated. Do I buy that? No, because in the previous hour, my guest was a Brexiteer, and he actually put a vote of no confidence against Boris Johnson.
What are they afraid of? Is it as naked and venal as afraid for their own electoral outlook at the next election?
Absolutely. This is all. Was that too blunt there? My answer.
No, it was politics.
But you know how this works. They're trying, and you know what this is about. I know you mentioned the cost of living crisis, and you know inflation. Lots of other countries are dealing with inflation. But what goes to the heart of this is the man. Is not the policy. Is the man and the way he holds on to that position. He has carried himself, and it goes to the heart of Partygate. The cake, the boozing, one rule for them, a rule for everyone else. And worth reminding our viewers, Richard, this is a time when he asked the country, of course, not to see loved ones. And what we know now, from the Sucre report is that what was happening behind closed doors.
But
So
also,
the hypocrisy.
But also, I think that on this question of what he did, I mean, it is the country wanted him because he was perceived as the right person to get Brexit done. He was a chancer. He knew how to
risks, yeah.
And he's, you know, look, the truth is, I mean, I've met Boris Johnson many times. He's exactly the person you hope to sit next to at dinner.
Yeah.
Because he's a witty raconteur.
He's charismatic.
Delightfully charming and all of those things.
But that should, I mean, I think people, the voters of the country have seen past that. They've seen right through that. And, you know, as we've been hearing time and time again, is that they want someone who can lead and who has integrity. Right. Go ahead.
Well, on this point, because you talked about the cost of living.
Yes.
I got a letter from the electricity company for my flat. I got a letter telling me that my electricity bill, wait for this, is going up 63%.
Yeah.
Because of the cap.
Yeah.
I mean, and now the mortgage has gone up three times.
Yeah.
So people in Britain, I mean, I'm sure where you are, you're having similar sort of issues and problems yourself. But the point is, here you have a Prime Minister who's on the ropes.
But Jacob Rees-Mogg and the Conservatives and Prime Minister Boris Johnson's allies would say, oh, hold on, Richard. You know, what we are seeing, everyone else is seeing. Inflation, the US is seeing it. You know, this is the cost of your gas or electricity bills. That has to do with the war in Ukraine. That has been their argument time and time again. But the reason we're here, and from what we've seen from those letters, is that those members of a Conservative Party want him out. They don't believe that he can be trusted, Richard.
You'll be around, you're not going
anywhere? I will, of course. I'm sure you won't let me go anywhere.
You're right, I won't. Thank you very much. Now, in the days before British lawmakers called for this confidence vote against Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister heard from critics at a rather awkward moment. So the PM and his wife were met by a chorus of boos and there were some cheers outside the Queen's Jubilee Thanksgiving service. He got a similar reception as he arrived for the Platinum Party at Buckingham Palace on Saturday. Bianca's outside number 10 Downing Street tonight. Bianca, the issue is, will he win?
That is the issue. That's the question. That boo that you just showed, though, I think says a lot, because monarchists, those who are enthusiastic enough to be waiting to see the royals go into the cathedral, are people that would typically be Conservative supporters if you're looking at voting blocks. And for the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom to be booed in such a setting really does say that his popularity has slumped to an all-time low. The mood is strange inside Parliament. The outlook has become more and more grim as the day's gone on. MPs know that a vote of confidence in their leader and all of the fratricidal infighting that comes with it does not make the party look good. Whether Boris Johnson wins or loses, it shows the Conservative Party in a bad light and really exposes its dirty laundry for all to see. As we've seen in resignation letters today, outspoken criticism against the PM, they might feel strongly against the Prime Minister, but those MPs still know that it's not making their party look particularly good brand-wise to the electorate, that they're all fighting and complaining about each other.
Bianca, what tonight, the fact it happened now, today, on this random Monday in June, is it just a numbers game? In other words, this was the day when they went over the threshold? Because it's not as if there was a deluge of letters all at once.
No, I think there have been several moments where there's likely to have been a spike in letters, and we've had some public announcements that people have put them in, because of course sending a letter to this committee is a private endeavour. It's usually secret, and the ratio of MPs who declare publicly that they've sent one to those who've actually sent them, just checking if anybody of note is going in behind me, no, we're all clear. is usually, you know, you get a lot more people declaring that a lot more people submitting letters than declaring those letters. So it's very difficult to tell. In terms of why this moment, well, from a practical perspective, it was considered that the Conservative Party and Graham Brady did not want to overshadow the Jubilee in any way. It's completely in contrast to the festivities in honour of the Queen, so there was no way that this vote was going to be announced to conflict with that. But it was also the aftermath of the Partygate scandal and more anger from constituents, and I think that's why this weekend was so crucial, because those MPs went back to their constituencies to have street parties and celebrations with their voters, and they heard that anger, which is not going away, against the Prime Minister, and they really are starting to understand that they don't think this man, who prides himself and builds his political brand on being an election winner, can any longer deliver that for them.
Bianca, you'll be at number 10 watching events for us. I'm grateful for you. Thank you. Tonight's vote follows a long list of scandals involving the Prime Minister. Most recently, of course, it's Partygate that's really caused him the most misery, and the swift condemnation after it was revealed that Boris Johnson and his staff partied together during the strictest of COVID lockdowns. In other words, breaking the very rules that they had set for everybody else. A damning report, the Sue Gray report, called out the administration for its culture of rule breaking. And in 2019, at the height of the Brexit crisis, when the Prime Minister suspended Parliament for longer than typical, another example of it, the Supreme Court ruled that was unlawful. Also, of course, the way the Prime Minister had dealt with Her Majesty the Queen. Joining me now, Giles Kenningham, founder of the Trafalgar Strategy, former head of political press to Prime Minister David Cameron. Let's be realistic here tonight. What is a number that secures Boris Johnson's position going forward, as opposed to keeps him on the rocks?
I don't know, Richard, if any number actually secures his future, because the very fact we are here now in this position, to some extent, some people may argue, has fatally undermined his authority. Now, remember, no Prime Minister has really ever fully recovered from one of these votes. Theresa May faced a vote of no confidence in 2018. She was gone 6 months later. Margaret Thatcher faced one. She was gone within weeks. John Major faced one, he won, he limped on and then got absolutely crushed at the 97 election. So actually, I think it's pretty difficult. Now, if, let's say, hypothetically, the numbers stay around 54, 55, which was what was needed to get to trigger this vote, then maybe he's okay. But, as soon as you get up into numbers of 80, 90, you've got a party, you've got almost a third of your party, which is ungovernable, which doesn't want you there. That is unsustainable, and we know divided parties don't win elections. And remember, you've still got some very problematic issues coming down the line. You've got two by-elections, one in Wakefield, which the Tories are expected to lose in the so-called Red Wall, and one in Tiverton in the southwest, which is a key Blue Wall battleground. Now, if they lose that, I think you could see a fresh round of bloodletting, even if Boris Johnson does survive tonight's vote. And I do think he will win tonight, but that's really going to be a hollow victory.
And I'm just looking at the content of the letter from Jesse Norman, who was an ally, a former ally, now writing in his letter asking for a vote. He says, Boris Johnson had presided over a culture of casual law breaking. But there's the other issue as well, which is important, which is the Northern Ireland Protocol as part of the Brexit and Northern Ireland Agreement. Now, the cavalier way, as seen by some, that they are about to trounce that treaty is also giving cause for concern about his premiership.
Of course, and you put your finger on there. The fact people are speaking so openly, so publicly, without caveats, criticising his premiership shows that his authority has effectively gone, that discipline has broken down. You have a divided party. Now, bear in mind that the public polls are also showing that Labour in the lead, that all this rule breaking during COVID has cut through and is going to be devastating to Boris at the polls. A lot of people will be making the calculation that, look, the Tory brand at the moment is tainted. How do we get over that? we get over that by removing him and we neutralise the problem. If I was Labour, I would be thinking, careful what you wish for here. You want Boris Johnson to survive, but damaged.
And also, I mean, which I think is appropriate to just mention, the Prime Minister had to apologise, didn't he, to Her Majesty the Queen for the party that took place, the Leaving Party that took place at Number 10, on the eve, of course, of the Duke of Edinburgh's funeral.
Yeah, of course. I mean, and the issue for Boris here is that this wasn't just a one-off. This was a catalogue of events which suggests a systematic pattern of rule breaking, which makes it even harder to defend. And you know, a lot of people, you speak to a lot of MPs, and I think they think the environment would be a lot more forgiving if at the start he'd held his hands up and said, look, yeah, we got this wrong, we broke the law, I'm really sorry, but as ever, what's made it worse has been the cover-up and the half-truths afterwards.
So let's put it bluntly, though, are Tory MPs now against exactly the qualities that they all loved about Boris Johnson when he was driving them towards Brexit and electoral victory, and that swashbuckling, daredevil, winner-takes-all mentality has now become a liability for them?
Well, yeah, I mean, let's look at this in reality. The Tory party, the Tory backbenchers, the MPs were never in love with Boris Johnson. It was a very transactional relationship in a context of, the backdrop of a Jeremy Corbyn Labour Party in which they saw he could secure their seat and romp home. He delivered that, but, a lot has changed in 3 years. You've got a new Labour leader now. Boris has had almost 3 years in power in which there have been a number of mistakes, and they're also looking at the polling now, and they're saying, well, the polling's showing you're going to lose me my marginal seat, therefore I'm not going to vote for you. The polling is showing that the breaking of our own lockdown rules, which he brought in, has cut through to the public, and they're not going to forget about it, and it's going to be devastating at the polls. So, yeah, once again, I don't think there was any enduring love for him. It was a very transactional relationship, and they're looking at that transaction saying, you know what? You served your purpose, but actually now, you might well cost you my seat at the next election. It's time for someone else to come to the fore.
I think you just summed it up, Giles, in that view of you've served your purpose, it's time. All right, so thank you, Giles Kennington, joining me there. Let me just tell you what we expect to happen over the next. So it's 8:15. In about another 25-30 minutes from now, the Tory MPs will gather in the committee room over in Westminster behind me. After that, at 9 o'clock, 45 minutes from now, Sir Graham Brady, the head of the committee, the chairman of the committee, will reveal the result. Now look, if Boris Johnson actually loses the vote, then it will be a political, earthquake of monumental proportions. If he ekes out a small victory, really interesting to know what happens then. A larger victory becomes even more tricky. We'll talk about the implications and what it means after the break. It's CNN. Good evening to you.
Culinary Journeys, in association with Ajinomoto.
Everything she has appreciation for, she's able to integrate into her culinary world. She's an artist and a cultural icon.
He's talking about Natsuko Shoji. She is the 32-year-old chef and owner of Ete, an award-winning pastry shop and restaurant combining modern French cooking with fresh and seasonal Japanese ingredients. From brioche to crispy scaled tilefish to its famous desserts. Dinner is always a cozy and flavorful affair.
The deliciousness of the food comes from my training and in the local ingredients I use. But what's more important to me is how the customers are feeling, who they are eating with, the visual, cerebral and emotional aspects of the meal.
The pandemic reminded us of how important diet is to health. That's why the Ajinomoto Group is committed to solving health issues around the world at the dinner table. A real solution means never settling for less.
ถึงแม้ว่าจะต้องลดความเค็มในอาหารลงแต่เราก็ต้องไม่ละทิ้งความอร่อยเราต้องการให้ทุกท่านได้เพลิดเพลินกับรสชาติความอร่อยของอาหารไปพร้อมกับสุขภาพที่ดี
A saúde é importante, mas queremos considerar também o legado do sabor regional. Como podemos melhorar o balanço nutricional mantendo o respeito à cultura gastronômica? Esse é o nosso desafio.
Tempat yang jauh pun bukan masalah. Kami selalu bisa menyediakannya. Kami terus mengupayakan dunia di mana siapapun bisa mengakses makanan bergizi dimanapun mereka berada.
We're here to provide nutritious meals to the entire world without compromising on taste, local ways of life, or accessibility, because that is nutrition without compromise.
Eat well, live well.
Welcome back. It's an historic night here at Westminster in London. Members of Boris Johnson's party are gathering in a matter of minutes, and some have chosen to publicly come out against the Prime Minister, despite the vote being private. Jeremy Hunt, for instance, tweeted that he's voting for change. He's arguably the most senior and prominent Conservative to actually speak out, saying he'll be voting for change. Of course, he'll also be voting to take over or he'll be looking for votes to take over if Johnson falls. John Penrose resigned today as the anti-corruption czar, saying Boris Johnson broke the rules and that he will vote against him. Joining me is Paul Scully, Conservative Member of Parliament. You are a government minister for small business, so you are on that quaintly phrase, you're on the government payroll
voter,
so you have to. So, I mean, on an issue like this, you have to vote for the Prime Minister.
Well, I mean, I have voted for the Prime Minister. Let's start with that position, but it's a secret ballot. But nonetheless, clearly, if I didn't believe in the Prime Minister, there's no way I could be tenable as to remain as a minister. So, as a matter of principle, I would clearly resign. But that's not my position.
Okay.
I'm supportive of the government. I'm supportive of the Prime Minister.
Why did you support him? The man is believed to be either a liar or a charlatan, or at best has a strange relationship with the truth.
No, look, I think the Prime Minister has, first of all, governed well in terms of all of the big decisions that we've had to make over the last couple of years. He's a brazen kind of guy, which you have to be to get things done over the stasis that we had since actually we were last here on the Green talking about Brexit, that stasis that we had in Parliament for nearly 2 years. He was the guy that got Brexit over the line and broke that deadlock. He then, as we moved into COVID, managed to roll out the vaccination program and is now leading, amongst the leaders of the world's response against the war in Ukraine.
But the Partygate left a stench. It left a feeling in the people that it was unfair. Good example, of course, Dominic Cummings with his nonsense about going off to the castle to test his eyesight. And everybody else, and Johnson didn't fire him. Johnson didn't fire him. He kept him. And there's been a feeling that there's one rule for number 10 people and one rule for the rest of the country.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Prime Minister is loyal. He was loyal to Dominic Cummings. I think Dominic Cummings has clearly let him down, and he's fueling a lot of the unrest against the Prime Minister that's led to this. But you're right, actually, there was a culture in number 10 that I know the Prime Minister regrets. I certainly regret. I get angry about when I read the Sue Gray report and read the full detail about how some of the staff that there's hundreds and thousand odd staff in number 10 and Cabinet Office, how they behaved. And so, first of all, the Prime Minister has right to apologise as the leader. He wouldn't have known. He wouldn't have known everything that was going on.
He apologised. First of all, he weaseled it with lots of, it was a work event. Then he got round it this way. Then I was only there for 5 minutes. Then it was only this. He never actually said, do you know something? You're right. We had parties. It was wrong. I'm sorry.
Because I think the thing is, he would not have known all of the detail that was going on. Because you sit there and think he works in the building and he lives next door, you think, okay, it's not like living in a flat and thumping on the wall saying, can you keep the sound down? It just doesn't work like that. So he wouldn't have known everything that went on until Sugoi came out, which is why he apologised, which is why he's changed a lot of the stuff in Number 10 to change the culture.
So he's going to win tonight because there's at least 160 of you who are on the government payroll. So he wins tonight. But how do you handle this view, whether it be John Major, whether it be any of Margaret Thatcher, Theresa May? Once you've had this vote, you're damaged goods, and it's only a matter of time with an egg timer.
There's only one way you can deal with that, and that's to deliver. We've got the massive inflationary pressures, we've got supply pressures, we've got a tight labour market. People are struggling at the moment, and we need to respond to that. We need to deliver on our manifesto, deliver on our promises in that manifesto, so that people can actually say, yes, I gave you an 80-seat majority in 2019, and this is what we've got as a result of it come the next general election in 2 years' time.
But let's take the by-elections coming up. Now, one of them, Wakefield, of course, is a good example. I mean, if that goes badly for you, then the whole levelling up, this idea of a new blue wall, this idea of the Tories are back in the north for the first time if ever, then that falls apart.
No, it doesn't fall apart, but it's mid-term. We are in mid-term in elections. But hold on a sec, but in mid-term in elections, we are actually literally only 4% behind in the polls at the moment. The poll that came out today, despite everything that's going on at the moment, we're 4% behind Labour. Labour clearly need to be 10% or more to be forming that majority. So it's not going to be easy for us. I'm not saying it's going to be easy for us at all, but you know, there is this gravitational pull that people want Boris to deliver.
What's the one thing now that, besides get away from the political, it's time to deliver, which I understand, and that's true, that's your manifesto. But as an MP, as a member of the party, forget you're a government minister, what's the one thing you want to see Boris Johnson now do, personally? Him, the man, the way he leads.
I want him to continue the change that he's made in Number 10, so that actually there's a clear sense of communication between Number 10 and the parliamentary party over there, and Number 10 and the members, the ordinary members and the councillors up and down the country. But then I want him to actually demonstrate over the next week or two to actually say, this is the plan that I've got for the cost of living, this is what I've got, the plan that I've got for growing the economy, for getting us out of our overheated housing market, especially in London and the South East.
You're the Minister for Small Business. And it is Quest Means Business. I just want to very quickly, I mean, small business is going to be clobbered in this country, like it is elsewhere. I'm not saying it's unique to Britain. There's not much you can do. You're heading for a recession.
I think we are going to be, it's going to be really difficult over the next year. But I think if you look at the predictions, the forecasts, that we are actually due in the following year to come out quite well out of the, in terms of the G7, in comparison to the G7. But we've got to knuckle down and actually remain confident about the fundamentals of the UK economy, which I still believe are good. But that will only work if we actually, as I say, deliver on that plan for growing the economy rather than being doom and gloom and worrying about the bubble within Westminster.
Minister, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And so, in 10 minutes, the MPs, the Tory MPs, let me just make this clear. We're talking about Tory MPs here. This is Boris Johnson's own members of Parliament. The Labour and everybody else is an element of schadenfreude, watching them pretzel themselves into something, trying to avoid oblivion. Anyway, they'll be arriving for the result of the no confidence vote. We'll cover. It's good evening to you. CNN in London.
Almost all carbon emissions come from industries that shape our world. But at Standard Chartered, we believe progress doesn't have to cost our planet. That's why we're helping our clients change the way they operate by mobilizing $300 billion in green and transition finance, accelerating the transition to a net zero world. Because where others see problems, we see potential. We're Standard Chartered, and we're here for good.
When you travel the world, make sure the world travels with you. Check in, log on, and get connected with all of the latest developments at your fingertips. CNN Partner Hotels. Connected to your world.
Our mission here at CNN and journalists, the news comes first. That's when your heart beats a little bit faster. More breaking news that we are following right now. You really work as hard as you can, getting the facts.
We're learning more about our lead plot.
It is critically important.
To our viewers in the United States and around the world, welcome to the Situation Room. We have breaking news.
For World Sport, I'm Patrick Snell, and this is CNN.
As the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson waited for the confidence vote, he spoke to President Zelensky. He's getting an update on the war in Ukraine. Now, the call came after Russia struck the capital city, Kyiv, with missiles. Now, it's the first time in more than a month that Kyiv has been hit in such a way. As Russian and Ukrainian troops continue to battle street by street for control of the industrial city of Severodonetsk, the last Ukraine-controlled city in Luhansk. Ben Wiedemann is in Kramatorsk, which is in Ukraine. Ben, just give us an idea of where you are vis-a-vis the sort of dispute and where the fighting is at the moment, so we can position you.
We're about an hour and a half's drive from Severodonetsk, just that way. And I've been there many times back in April when I was here. And even back then, it was being pounded by Russian artillery. And what we've seen, certainly in the last few weeks, is this has become the epicenter, Severodonetsk, of Russia's military operations in Ukraine. They are, according to Ukrainian officials, sparing no men or materiel to retake, or rather to take, that city. And at the end of last week, Richard, even the Ukrainians were conceding that the Russians controlled about 80% of that city. As of the weekend, apparently the Ukrainians launched a counterattack, retook some territory, but this morning, Monday morning, we heard that the Russians were back on the offensive and were pushing back the Ukrainians. Now, overnight, President Volodymyr Zelensky made a surprise, obviously top secret visit to the town of Lysychansk, which overlooks Severodonetsk, very much within range of Russian artillery. And his visit really emphasizes the importance this country gives to holding on to that city. However, the Ukrainians are quick to say that without more assistance, and particularly better long-range missiles and artillery from the West, which the UK and the US have promised, they will not be able to hold on to Severodonetsk much longer. We heard this morning that the UK, like the US, is going to provide these long-range weapons, but Ukrainian troops will have to be trained, and then those weapons are going to have to get all the way here, and that may be too late. Richard?
You see, that's exactly where I wanted to go, because I heard this morning about the UK and the longer range missiles. Same sort of agreement, can't be used again to attack within Russia. But the training of the Ukrainians will be done either in the UK or out of country, and they're talking weeks. Now, this could be a case of, well, a day late and a dollar short by the time it all gets there and gets sorted.
Yes, this is the problem. And, you know, from almost the beginning of the conflict, particularly President Zelensky has urged for the rapid delivery of weapon systems. But the situation here, it's not a surprise. I was here in April, and it was clear that the Russians were redirecting their resources, their men, their equipment to this part of the country to try to gain total control of Donetsk and Luhansk, the two provinces that comprise the Donbas region. And it appears that perhaps it may be too late to get these weapons in place, and time is of the essence. Richard?
Ben Wiedemann, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. It's a summer evening. It's not that warm. Late spring evening here in London. It's not that warm, but it's not raining, which is a blessing in its own right. And in the next 10 minutes or so, the members of the Tory party, the members of Parliament of the Tory party, will gather. They will be hearing the results of the confidence vote into Boris Johnson. That's coming up.
Growing up around individuals that were dedicated to service served as a great example for how I wanted to live my life. You grow up with the mentality of how do you support the person next to you. At Fujifilm, partnership is at the core of what we do. We partner with pharmaceutical companies to help develop and manufacture biopharmaceuticals. Being in a profession where you can help people, it's extremely motivating. It's why we're doing what we're doing.
Redwood Materials is a sustainable battery materials company. So, we focus on, building a closed-loop ecosystem for lithium-ion batteries. We recycle old lithium-ion batteries of all different types, both automotive, but also consumer electronics. We take the materials out of those batteries, refine them, extract them, and then remanufacture them into new components that can go directly back into battery manufacture. So I see this eventually, going to be the vast majority of the materials that are going into batteries that will be recycled in the future. Batteries are amazing because they are so recyclable. More than 90% of the materials, those critical materials in the battery, can be reused many, many times without degradation. I think people are really realizing the benefits of having a high recycled material content, both in terms of the environmental footprint of the batteries, but also the cost of those materials.
Afghan women are afraid that this is the beginning of your efforts to erase them from the workspace.
Malumnis, it's not clear. Even if we appear with the burqa, maybe they will say that women's voices are forbidden.
Did you ever imagine that you would be prevented from going to school?
Girls' education is fundamental to the dignity of Afghan life.
Do you believe that young girls will be allowed to go to school here in Afghanistan?
This is CNN Breaking News.
And the breaking news, Conservative members of Parliament are at the moment gathering in the committee room at Westminster behind me, where they will hear the results of the vote of no confidence that they have just taken in Boris Johnson, or a vote of confidence if you'd like. It's the rank and file of the party, the members of Parliament, that are being tested. They are the ones that have to say. Boris Johnson spent all day trying to win his own MPs over. All he needs is a simple majority of 180 for the Prime Minister to stay in power. He needs 180 votes and he basically stays. The implications of that vote is, with me is Quentin Peel, who joins me now here at Westminster, who is an Associate Fellow at Chatham House. Good to see you, sir.
Hi, Rich.
What do you make of it?
Well, I think he's going to survive badly, and they will be very badly damaged by this whole affair.
What's a bad number in your view?
I think anything more than 100 votes against him is actually not looking good.
100? You think that was many?
Yeah, I think that would look pretty bad, because it would show that a really substantial chunk of his own party have lost faith in him. And I think they're reflecting what they're hearing on the ground, which is that there's a real backlash against the man who used to walk on water.
Why is this? I mean, what has he done wrong? Everybody knew he was a bit of a lad and a chancer.
Yeah, but I think that he's just gone on being in denial of when he's actually misbehaved. And it's just played, with COVID in the background, it's just played much worse than it would normally. So he's really, in a funny way, for a man who was so in touch with his electorate, he's no longer really in touch.
He could have saved this, couldn't he, if he'd said, I'm really sorry. But all that nonsense about, well, it was a work event, and it was cheese and wine, and we didn't really do this, and I only stayed for 5 minutes, and there was only a birthday cake for a minute or two.
I think he seriously has never actually recognised that he did wrong. He doesn't realise that, and he doesn't therefore understand this backlash, this loss of trust. And losing trust when you're in a position like that is actually fatal. His own people have lost trust in him.
But the other problem, of course, is if you look back at Boris Johnson, even in Brussels, which you will, of course,
I remember him.
You remember, he was a Europhile. For the longest time, this was a man who was a Europhile.
Well, up to a point, but he didn't care what he wrote as long as it was on the front page. And this is the man, this is why you shouldn't make a journalist Prime Minister. I mean, it's fatal. All he wants to be is the man who's got his byline on the front page.
And then he switched sides, not switched sides, but he became ambiguous over Brexit until he saw the way it was going and he rode the Brexit bus.
Absolutely, yes.
And the claims of 300 million a week or whatever it was on the National Health Service.
Yes, and he basically played it very cleverly in order to become Prime Minister. And the one person who I suspect may be rather enjoying his dilemma today is the person he replaced as Prime Minister, Theresa May.
There was never any question of her integrity.
No,
with Theresa May.
That's right.
The votes of confidence were over her competence.
Yeah, she was dull, but she was straight. And I think people are now saying that's what we need to win back the trust of the electorate. I mean, in one way, Boris Johnson is still a very lucky man. This is happening before 2 local elections, which are going to see his party very badly punished by voters in 2 weeks' time.
What are they being punished for? Accepting the old, I mean, Paul Scully, the MP minister who was here a minute ago, said, well, it's mid-term and we always, this always happens. And there's a certain truth in that. But what are they punishing them for?
Well, the cost of living crisis is obviously huge. And I think people feel that Boris Johnson, with his sense of privilege, and his fellow members of the cabinet, don't really get how people are feeling the pinch.
It's very difficult. Let's take the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak, whose family wealth is in the tens, if not hundreds of millions, and there have been some very serious, not allegations, but just weirdness.
Yes, I mean, he just doesn't seem to be in touch, which is why I don't think he's any longer a really serious candidate to replace Johnson, if, as I suspect, Johnson will go before the end of the year.
Oh, you think it's that soon?
I think so, yeah.
Now, how does that happen? So let's say he wins tonight, and he wins, but you know, there's say 80 to 110 against him. So what happens after that?
Well, I think that it starts a process of continual complaints from the backbenches against him, rebellions on the backbenches, and although
he can't be challenged again.
Well, the rules say he can't be challenged again, but this is politics. This is not regulations. They can change those rules and hold another vote. Everybody seems to think that actually is malleable. They can
really?
do it.
They can,
yes.
They can do
They
it.
could change the rules of this 1922 committee that represents all the Conservative members. If there's a real backlash against him and they don't believe he's going to be the winner that he was, then I think they'll find a way of moving him.
Right, and if he goes, who takes over?
Well, that's the key question, which is one reason also that he's lucky. There's no obvious successor. I mean, there's Liz Truss, who would love the job,
Foreign
but
Secretary.
a lot of people think she's not really up to it. There's Jeremy Hunt, former Foreign Secretary and Health Secretary.
Who's had several goes at it.
Safe pair of hands,
right,
but dull. And there's Rishi Sunak, who, as you said, is such a wealthy finance minister that he doesn't really relate to it. So who is there to replace Boris Johnson? They're in a terrible dilemma.
I remember what you said. By the end of the year, good to see you, as
Cheers,
always. Thank you,
Richard.
sir. Now, there's no shortage of possible successors hoping to replace. We've just gone through some of the names. If he loses the vote, it will essentially be the start of the race to pick the next Conservative leader and thereby Prime Minister. Here's a look at the jockeys, if you will, for the top spot. Some of the names are very familiar. There's the Chancellor, we were just saying, Rishi Sunak, but he has problems with family money. The Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, not the most exciting of people, arguably, and some say that not really quite up to it. Then you've got Jeremy Hunt, Tom Tugendhat, there's a name of great political history and story in Britain, and Penny Morant as well. Now, the opposition leader, Sir Keir Starmer, said it's only a matter of time before Boris Johnson is replaced.
I think history tells us that this is the beginning of the end. If you look at the previous examples of no confidence votes, even when Conservative Prime Ministers survive those, and he might survive it tonight, the damage is already done.
Bianca is with me from Downing Street. Bianca, am I being too previous, a little premature in starting to speculate on replacements? You know, he could win this, and he could win it reasonably big. No, Quentin doesn't think he will, but and others don't, but he could.
It's possible, but MPs within that building behind you will be undergoing the same speculation about who will replace the Prime Minister. It's the only responsible thing to do when the Prime Minister's career looks in dire jeopardy, which it seems to be tonight. And of those runners and riders that you just mentioned, the striking feature is that it's not clear whatsoever which one of them would be able to garner even a medium amount of support, because it's not clear tonight where the main attack on Boris Johnson will come from. It's not coming predominantly from the right wing or from the progressive side. It's coming throughout the party for completely different reasons, to do with whether it's loss of trust, integrity, the way that he manages the government. We heard from one of his MPs this morning who had supported him throughout his mayoral career and prime ministerial career, who said he's trying to import parts of the presidential system and just change all the rules that he doesn't like. The reasons are so different. So in the same way that we can't predict exactly what will be the downfall of Boris Johnson and the main reasons for doing so, we can't predict who the next leader would be if he isn't successful this evening.
Okay, so in this scenario, I was interested. Quentin Peel thinks 80 to 100 could be a number against Boris Johnson. What do you think in terms of what you will be looking for?
As I said to you earlier, it's interesting how the pitch has changed throughout the day. This morning, there weren't really many people who believed that Boris Johnson wouldn't survive this vote. And that's largely because you have 160 MPs who are involved with the government on the payroll that would be expected to vote for the Prime Minister. Also, Theresa May was deeply unpopular at the time that a confidence vote in her was held. She got 63% of the vote and managed to stagger on. So it's very difficult for a Prime Minister to actually lose a confidence vote. And even though, strictly speaking, they might win, obviously it inflicts so much political damage that their careers are largely over in a matter of months anyway. It's now much harder to predict because we've had more resignations, more people declaring that they voted against the Prime Minister that I've known for years and watched their careers and did not expect. These have been people in support of the Prime Minister from the right wing of the party that tend to be a lot more sympathetic towards him. I think Quentin's right in that if there's any more than 100 votes against the Prime Minister, it damages him still, because the only opportunity in today for Boris Johnson from a positive perspective would be essentially to communicate, okay then, put your money where your mouth is, and maybe less people vote against the Prime Minister than the picture that is painted in the media and in political circles would suggest. But I think that's so unlikely. So basically any outcome now is just going to add another blow to already extremely beleaguered political carcass.
Bianca, stay with me please in Downing Street. Issa's here. Issa, we call this place where we are Abingdon Green, where I think we get the message that the people behind us want.
We know what they feel.
Yeah, Johnson. No
the message clear.
Right, but you've been trolling the Green. What are people saying?
Well, the majority of people think that he won't go. Those I've been speaking to, the numbers, there will be many MPs voting for him, but it won't be enough to unseat him yet. Is it going to be a convincing win? Those people I've been speaking to say no. So what does this become then? How many months are we looking that he will have to battle? But also the internal battle, will this turn into a political battle within the Tory party? Because that can get very nasty.
All right, question to both Issa and you, Bianca. Issa first. The inevitability that Johnson is toast by Christmas.
He's a political chameleon. I say no, he won't. He'll still be here.
He'll still be here by Christmas. Yep. Bianca?
I don't see that as being possible because he's no longer Teflon, and with each scandal he's politically bruised and damaged. He's no longer able to get off scot-free, so I don't think he's got many more lives left. In fact, an MP who used to support him ardently was talking to me this morning and said he was the cat with 9 lives, we're now on the last one, it can't be long, and I think he's putting it well.
So, Bianca, we're getting to the point now. I'm just looking at actually, I was looking at my watch to see what time it is. I've only got to really... Oh, I can't even see Big Ben.
10 to 9, so less than 9 minutes or so to...
Can't even see it. Less than 10 minutes. Bianca, you've studied, watched and been part of the British political cognoscenti for some years. Is this the Tory party, the fracticide of which they are so well known?
Oh, indubitably. But what's interesting is I've had 2 Conservative MPs say to me, we deserve a spell in opposition now. I mean, can you imagine that? And for our viewers around the world, or our viewers in America, the idea of the Democrats saying, you know what, the Republicans need to take over for a bit because we are in such a mess. I think that really does say it all.
Right, but on that point, Issa, it was very telling. Oh, we're looking now at live pictures. Just to let me tell you, we're looking at live pictures from inside the room. All right, I can avoid it no longer to explain why it's called the 1922 committee. It is a committee of backbenchers, not frontbenchers, and Bianca, I'm sure, Bianca, you would like to explain the reasoning where the name 1922 Backbench Committee comes from.
Yes, I would. Sorry, I was just checking a text from an MP that was just outside the room. The party, interestingly enough, you ask about the committee. I believe the committee was formed the year after 1922. I think it was officially formed in 1923. I remember someone telling me that anecdote. But it is a committee of backbenchers who have no affiliation with the government through ministerial roles in order for them to exert a power over the party, and they are the ones charged with the ability to hold a confidence vote. And the chairman of the 1922 committee, Graham Brady, is the only person in the world that knows how many letters are held against the Prime Minister, who can trigger mirror what we're seeing today, which is a vote of no confidence if 15% of the Parliamentary Conservative Party write in saying we no longer have confidence in our leader.
You're right, and it was 1923. It was after the 1922 election, and where, of course, they ousted a government. And interestingly, it wasn't the old MPs from 1922. It was the new intake in 1923 that formed this backbench committee, which has since been. I always remember Sir Marcus Fox was head of the 1922, and we always describe it in that journalistic sobriquet of shorthand, the influential 1922 committee.
See, you learn something every day, don't you, Richard? And we are expecting, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bianca, we are expecting to get a readout of the vote from Sir Graham Brady. We're expecting, I suspect, any time from 9 o'clock, so about 6 minutes or so. But interesting that what Bianca was saying earlier.